So now we're going to be looking at fractions, decimals, and percents, and more specifically, we're going to be looking at how we can go from a decimal number to its fraction equivalent, and from a fraction to its decimal equivalent, from a fraction to its percent, from a percent back to a fraction, and from a decimal to a percent, or if we have a percent, how can we change that to the same equivalent number in its decimal form. So let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to start by looking first at decimals. Okay. So if you have a decimal number, and we're trying to change that so that way we can go from a decimal number to its percent equivalent, to its fraction equivalent, then first thing we want to do, okay, is we want to think about converting the decimal and then converting it to using its place value. And once we've done that, we can simplify it. Okay, let's see if I can get this zoomed in a little bit more. And so we're going to be converting the decimal using its place value and then simplifying. So here, for example, if we have 0.75, we'll read this, and since the last value of the decimal number is in the hundredths place, this decimal is read as 0.75, or we can say it's 75 hundredths. And so here, we're going to change that into 75 hundredths by writing it as 75 over 100. And already we have it in fraction form. However, we can simplify this. Both 75 and 100 are divisible by 25, so I can divide both of them by 25 to come up with a simplified form of the fraction, which is 3/4. If I'm going from the fraction down to the decimal version, then I'm kind of doing basically the reverse idea. And so here, what we can do, since we know that every fraction is a division problem, we really can think that we're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. And so here, if we have 3/4, we're going to then think, okay, well, how can I divide that? Numerator divided by denominator, top number divided by bottom number. That's the inside number that gets divided by the outside number. So inside goes the 3, outside goes the 4. Okay, and now we're going to think of how we can do that long division, and we end up with 0.75. Let's take a look now on the other end of this all. And on the other end of this, we have going from a fraction to a percent. So that's where we're going to start, moving from a fraction that we're given and changing it to a number that is the same thing in its percent form. Okay, here we go. So in order to do this, we need to convert the fraction into a denominator of 100. So for example, 3/4, I could think it's going to be 3 to 4 or something over 100, because we know that 3/4 then would be the fraction, but if it's a percent, it's going to be for every 100. So 100 should be on the bottom. Here, if I want to find out what x is going to be, I want to think, okay, well, how can I create a fraction that's equivalent? And so I know that I can go from 4 to 100 by multiplying by 25. And so I will also multiply 3 times 25. And so x would end up being 75. 75 per 100, or 75%. Let me go ahead and flip this over now. Okay, looking at the other side of it all, I want to move now from a percent and go back to what it would be as a fraction. Well, we know that every percent is something per every 100. So here, to convert it, we're going to then convert the percent to a fraction over 100. And then we can simplify if it's possible. So 75% really is 75 for every 100. So 75 over 100. And we can simplify this, like we saw earlier, divided by 25 on each. It already is in a fraction form, but a more simplified version, something that's easier to work with and manage and understand, is 3/4. Looking at the bottom portion here now, we're thinking about taking a decimal number and changing it so that way it is its percent equivalent. So the number that would be a percent form for the decimal. And to do this, we can take the decimal and we can multiply it by 100. In this case, 0.075 multiplied by 100 is 75. And so we find that 75%. When you multiply by 100, you can actually think about just moving the decimal place over to the right 2 places. Because, for example, here, move it over once, you get times 10. Move it over twice, now you're multiplying by 100. On the opposite end, going from a percent to a decimal form, it's actually quite similar, except now, obviously, instead of moving to the right, which you're multiplying by 100, what you can imagine is we're going to take the percent number, and now we're going to divide by 100. So here, in this example, you'll notice 75, my decimal actually should be at the very end of it, because it is a whole number. So 75, if I move it over to the left once, I'm dividing by 10. If I move it over one more time, now I'm dividing by 100. I end up with 0.75. And don't forget here, you want to remove the percent symbol, otherwise you've changed the number completely. Don't forget with this one, you want to make sure you put in the percent symbol, because now you are actually adding it in, right? And if you don't, it's a completely different number. So same idea. If you want to think about dividing by 100 for this one, that would be the same process as actually moving that decimal point over to the left 2 places. And here we are with your completed chart.